Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Sprinklebeard, and today we are going to be reviewing Nisalt, Toxin in the Sands. Today's video we're going to do a little bit differently. We're going to start off by showcasing how Nisalt works first, and then we're going to go back and read through his skills and show off what is actually happening. So here we're going to go into a Nightmare 2 Dragon. This is going to be one of the best homes for Nisalt in the game. His job in this game is your single target damage over time effect. So dots, as I'm going to be calling them in the rest of the video. If you want your target's health to melt and drip away from that health bar, Nisalt is going to be the main champion to do that. For a lot of players, we recommended Wrath early, and he puts on that burning effect, and we have watched things die very quickly under Wrath's giant claymore. Nisalt, ironically enough, has very comparable damage. However, it is best used against things that are single target. So, like this dragon, we are going to compare Wrath and Nisalt after about 1 minute worth of time. It's the dragon! I did buy a new mouse, by the way. I just haven't plugged it in yet, so bear with me.
Sacrifice for Nisalt's science.
If I swear, it's because of that nonsense. Oh, I should have just gone and plugged in my new mouse before starting this recording. I'm glad that I like this recording the most.
Sacrifice for Nisalt's science.
Alright, so we're going to let this go for about a minute. So Nisalt first has to perform his alchemy, where he can make up to 3 potions. Once he has crafted all 3 potions, those are ammunition for him. So he then has to wait until he uses up all 3 ammo before he can start his alchemy. His ultimate does give him unlimited shots, so here I can be a little cheesy. And because the breath was going on and I wanted to make sure we broke it in time, we can just use Nisalt's ultimate to guarantee us a breakthrough on that. But once he goes out to having 0 potions again, he has to restock that ammo. So I actually meant to cut it off at a minute, and instead we got to talking about it, which is fine. So we're going to let this go down to 3 minutes. Wrath has gotten off about 5 ultimates in this time frame. I think that was... Pretty sure that was 5. It might have only been 4. But as we can see, Wrath is stacked on this account. Now, Nisalt, I have given some of our best gear to. Now, with that being said, Nisalt is not fully skilled up and is not fully awakened. And he is doing about 30% of Wrath's damage. However, understand that the harder the bosses that we take Nisalt into, the more Nisalt is going to shine. Also, comparing to Wrath with his legendary stats is a very hard thing to do. Wrath is also 60. Our Nisalt, I think, is like 51 or 52. The big thing is, notice that this damage is comparable, right? So at the 2-minute mark, if he's doing 30% of the damage that Wrath is doing, he is still doing a buttload of damage. And then when we go to our next dragon, up to like Nightmare 3, those numbers will get a lot more comparable very, very quickly. With that being said, let's get into the review of our champion. So again, what is Nisalt's role in this game? He is a magic dealing, potion crafting champion. For those of us who like the concept of alchemy, right? Making potions, making gold from nothing, and having those experiments blow up in our face. Nisalt is actually this great embodiment of that concept. Unfortunately, his potions never do backfire on him in this game. It would have been a hilariously clever design that his potions could break on himself or something. However, now that we have a good idea of how he works, reading through his kit, I think, will make more sense in this video. If you guys like this concept where I get to show off the champion and their ultimate, maybe we'll switch to this style for any future video going forward. So his talent, when deployed, starts using alchemy. The more poison vials produced, the higher the damage, scaling up to 40%. The more combustible vials produced, the more targets that fire can spread to, up to a cap of 3. The effect will be reset when alchemy is re-triggered. So he gets this if you get 3 poison vials, you would get this damage boost of 40%. So then if you ultimate with 3 poison vials spinning around you, or if you had 3 poison vials spinning around you, if you ultimate, your ultimate will get 40% extra damage. Now when he ultimates, we get unlimited vials during that time, and he will pull out a random vial. It does not matter if he has 3 poisons around him. He will still pull out some poison and some fire, and that is very, very important to us, and I will show why in a moment. But understand that this is the main thing to his kit. A small warning that I want to give to newer players. So if you are not attacking Nightmare 2 Dragon or above, I would cautiously warn you that Nisalt will feel like a trap if you get him and work on him early. Why do I say that? So his alchemy skill is actually the concern. So at base, like when you first get him at rank 1, like with no promotions or anything, his alchemy takes 13 seconds to craft those 3 vials. So that's a little over 4 seconds per vial, right? It's 4.3 seconds per vial to craft them. And then if we look at his stats are decent. He's got a very respectable attack stat. It's kind of right in the middle of most of the attack stats of epic champions. His cost is 18, which is pretty average as well. It's slightly high, but it's not terrible. And then his attack interval is 2.6 seconds, which is the absolute average. So for a champion that has all these averages, right, but you do these poison and burning effects, why is he one of my favorite champions? I love him because he is heavily designed with this flaw, right? Is that your alchemy originally takes you 13 seconds. As you promote him up to rank 5, so promotion 5, he does get the reduction from 13 seconds down to 10 seconds, which is massive. That's from 4.3 seconds per vial down to 3.3 seconds per vial. And the big reason that this is such an enormous thing is you want him to craft all 3, you want him to throw those 3 away as quickly as possible. That way he can get started on his alchemy again. This also means that if you plan to ult with him, you kind of have to prepare mentally to heavily watch what he's doing. Because in most cases, to get the most out of your ultimate, you're most likely going to want those 2 to 3 poison orbs, vials, floating around him before you ult with him. So if you get unlucky and they turn red on you, all of a sudden you're like, oh no, I didn't need the fire, especially against a single target boss. With that being said as well, his consistency is not going to be the most consistent out of any of the other champions in this game. He literally is a random champion because there's no predicting when you're going to get poison, when you're going to get fire. It does not seem to be like a coin flip per se. There's tons of times where you will get 2 to 3 poison vials, and those are going to be the times where you really want to ult. Or if you've taken them into AoE content, which I don't highly recommend, but if you did, you would want those 3 fire vials, and then you would want to ult so that he's spreading that burns around on as many targets as possible. So now that we've read his talent, let's get into his skills and then his awakenings. And you can see very quickly, or I will narrate why I think he's so good. His basic attack, it's magic, throws 1 magic vial at the enemy, dealing 220% magic damage, scaling up to 240% magic damage, and inflicts a poison or burning effect for 5 seconds. I want to stress that for 5 seconds is not only massive in this game, but you have a guaranteed poison or a guaranteed burning. Now, burning in this game, burning does 20% of your character's attack damage per second for the duration of the burn. So in this case, it's 5 seconds. I think on a lot of other champions, it's only about 4 seconds. Let's go look at Wrath real quick. He's the easiest one that I can think of that has a burning effect. So burning, oh, his burning effect actually does last 5 seconds. Now that makes me slightly disappointed because I thought his was only like 3 or 4 seconds. Not a big deal. Nisalt is still very interesting. The huge thing about Nisalt's basic attack, his basic attack is doing double damage compared to all the other champions in the game. Majority of the champions in this game, if you look at their damages, they're doing like 100 to 120% off of their base attack, right? Obviously, yes, it scales up. Even some of your legendary champions are attacking twice for like 85% damage, which is still less than Nisalt's 220. Now, the reason that I really want to stress that this 220 scaling up to 240 is so amazing is that understand when you crit, you're doing that extra 50% damage, like, you know, base. That means instead of you doing 220, you're adding an extra 110 onto that. So that takes you up to 330. Or if you have him fully skilled out, that would be 240, which means you would be hitting for an extra, you would be hitting for 360 instead of that 240, which is bonkers to think about. That's so much damage. And then not only is that just like amazing damage up front, not on an ultimate skill, you are guaranteed a poison or a burn. I do want to stress if there is a boss that is immune to a poison or a burn, this won't take effect. However, I haven't found an enemy in this game yet that is immune to poison or burning. Even certain things in the Void, which I was like worried that there's certain gimmick fights that go on. I was like, oh, maybe these things can't be poisoned. No, they can be poisoned. They can absolutely be poisoned. So Nisalt has some amazing potential just off of this A1. So next is his passive, Scalding Tonic. Magic vials react on enemies to cause toxic fire, dealing 40% damage, scaling up to 50% in total. Magic damage every second, lasting for 3 seconds, scaling up to 5 seconds. So not only does he have burning and poison, he has toxic burn as well. He has an additional status effect that he can put onto enemies, and it's for 50% of his damage, not that 20% from the burn, right? You now add another 50 on, so he's kind of doing like 70% damage. It's nuts. You can just add, so he has 3 different dots that he can put on enemies, and it's very, very reliable. If you consider, like when we were watching or rewatched the video, and if you watch that dragon fight, as he's spinning those alchemy vials around himself, you get to see what 3 he produced. It is extraordinarily rare that he produces 3 of the same kind. However, the more you play with him, you will notice, oh wow, he does seem to produce like 3 poison pretty like on average. He does it at least once per mission. But yes, you have 3 different dots that you can put on an enemy. So they've kind of balanced him out, because I think that if you were to let him put on these 3 dots, his damage would have had to been scaled way down. And that is not nearly as fun as throwing out vials at something and watching the thing just melt away. Lastly, his ultimate is called Bottomless Flask. During the ultimate, gains infinite magic vials for 15 seconds. And if we level this up, we get reduced skill cost, so we'll take it from about 1,000 rage down to 900 rage. And instead of it only being for 15 seconds, we scale it up to 25 seconds. And this is that comparison that I was trying to mention with Wrath, like versus Wrath in Dragon, is that Nisalt did decent damage, and my Nisalt is not fully skilled up. We'll go look at him in a second to see where I have him skilled up. And he's certainly not awakened to +5 the way that Wrath is. And when we go through the awakenings, that is, again, like, this is a champion where the awakenings, I think, will change drastically how people view the champion. So Awakening 1. Durations of poison, burning, and toxic burn are increased by 1 second. So now we're going to go from that 5 seconds to 6 seconds. And for anybody not really thinking about it too much, that will increase your dot damage by 20%, right? Because if we go from 5 seconds and we're adding on 1 second, so 1/5 of that time gets added on, your dot damage specifically, not your base damage, not that crit from that initial flask breaking open on the heads of your enemies. It's that dot damage will all increase by 20%. Because you have 3 different dots, you potentially could increase by 60% on a single throw. It is nuts. It's absolutely nuts. Awakening 2, crit damage increase by plus 15%. So this is the game telling you, yes, he's a dot champion, but you can still crit with him. And those crits are going to hit very, very hard. I absolutely love this, and I also think it's a hilarious hint of, hey, pay attention. Don't just build him like pure attack speed or pure attack. He can crit for some big damage. Awakening 3. Toxic Fire inflicts 30% extra damage on targets with HP higher than 50%. Now, for enemies like Dragon, who have an infinite health bar, I do think that this passive should work the entire time, because the health bar technically doesn't go down. However, the game might have some weird programming that, since the health bar is around like 10,000 HP, that for the first 5,000 it does work, for the last 5,000 it doesn't. So that would give you some massive variables in damage depending on when his vial hit compared to your other champions hitting. Or if you're like me and you play with certain effects that add an extra auto attack based upon your auto attack, that could also really mess up some certain calculations. So I do want to stress, Nisalt's not going to be the most consistent champion for you. And later in the video, we will go over some other shortcomings for him. With that being said, I still think additional 30% extra damage to like whittle down your enemy's HP, that's awesome. It's kind of like a reverse execution. So executions in most games, they deal more damage the lower HP your target is. In this case, it deals more damage the higher their HP is. I don't know what we want to call that, like first strike or eye poke, something like that. Awakening 4, Rage Regen +1. What's really good about this specifically, my guild leader and I were having an interesting conversation the other day that we don't feel like Rage Regen in terms of stats is that valuable. And the only argument that I had to be like Rage Regen is good is when your champion is not actually directly in combat. So all the time that Nisalt spends on making his alchemy potions, he's not attacking. And then after he fires all 3, he goes back to his alchemy, or there's times where he's waiting for the next wave to come. With that being said, during those times, that Rage Regen is going to be extremely valuable on him. That will get him to his ultimate faster. The faster you get to his ultimate, the more damage he's outputting reliably. So I do like this Rage Regen. But with that being said, I will say, when your champions attack, they tend to build up more rage more quickly. So on a lot of your damage dealers, you don't actually want Rage Regen. I originally thought it was a decent stat for them. Not the best, but like it's not going to hurt them. In all honesty, we would much prefer attack speed, because the faster we're attacking, the faster we're building up rage. That is probably going to be again, it's one of those things. I get that every champion wants attack speed, but the fact that a lot of champions gain rage on hit when they attack, yes, it makes more sense that we want them to get to their ultimate as quickly as possible. Awakening 5. During the ultimate, increases his attack speed by 100. This is where I think he's going to shine significantly, right? If you get that ultimate up to 25 seconds and then he also gains 100 attack speed on top of it, he's going to be tossing out vials so quickly. And this is one of the reasons that even though he only has ammunition for 3, I do think attack speed is a very worthwhile talent on him, because every time you go into your ultimate, you are greatly increasing his damage. Because it's not only just, oh, he has unlimited flasks, it makes him a sustained DPS champion that is constantly mixing toxic fire on your enemy. Again, burns in this game can stack. I don't know if toxic fire can stack. Admittedly, it doesn't tell me that it can. So I'm going to assume that it does not. But it also doesn't tell me that it can't stack. So maybe I should assume that it can stack. Anyways, let's talk about where Nisalt would be best used in. Nisalt's this very interesting champion in the game. Because you have this ammunition system, he is not going to be a heavy, consistent DPS outsource for you. However, when he goes active, right, if you want to think of him almost like a slumbering dragon, that he's slumbering while he's crafting, but then once he's awakened, he's going to output some amazing damage. He will put out some big, heavy damage that does offset that downtime. So even though you have downtime with him, that is not necessarily the direct weakness that most people are going to think of. The bigger weakness that happens is that the two major flaws that Nisalt has is that as you attack with him, if the target that he was attacking should die, right? If there's another AoE champion somewhere in the mix here.
I shall be waiting to collect their souls.
Where's my Nisalt? There's Nazim. He's like an assault. Ooh, should I title this video Nisalt Assault? Is he already in my party? He's already in my party. I do this so frequently. So 2 of the giant weaknesses that I want to go over with Nisalt, so that newer players can understand that when you have a champion with a really, really cool design in the game, there are inherent weaknesses to every champion.
Your queen has
So in this
arrived.
example, we're going to watch some of these goblins start to run past Nisalt. That is giant weakness number 1. That if he does not have his ammo already crafted, Nisalt is put onto the back foot instantly. And more often than not, when you have fast enemies, or when you have even just a moderate paced enemy, Nisalt is going to miss his opportunity to attack them until he crafts his potions. Then on top of that, he can only attack 3 times. So if there's more than 3 goblins, Nisalt's not going to be able to attack more than 3. Then finally on top of that, let's say on this wave he does attack, but he only attacks once. Now he's down to 2 ammo. That means when the next wave comes out, Nisalt has not started his new alchemy session yet. So he's only going to have 2 shots for the next wave, which is quite horrible, because if the next wave has more enemies, more than 2, Nisalt instantly loses a lot of value. So understand, as an AoE champion, I don't think this is one of his strongest points. I do think if you were to get 3 fire vials on something like Gear Raid 1, it is feasible that he would be usable. I don't think he would be dependable on Gear Raid 1 at all. Unless your concept is, I want to try to burst down like enemies one at a time, whereas the rest of Gear Raid 1, I'm sorry, specifically Gear Raid 1-19 and above, you have to fight a different style of boss. I don't want to go into too many spoilers, but if your concept is, I want to burst down some of these enemies before something else happens, yes, in theory, his excellent damage, him being single target, you potentially could burst down that thing. Equally though, if you can't burst down that thing, Nisalt will feel twice as bad. So one big issue again we have here is that as he's crafting potions, he is not attacking. So these things are getting into position long before Nisalt's ready to attack. The second big thing that I want to mention, so now that he's missing an orb, he is now 30% less effective than where he was before. So it doesn't matter how much BP he has, how much gear we have on him. He is now 30% less effective than what he was. More specifically, if Volca here gets the killing blow on a target, but Nisalt has thrown a potion, that is where not only do you lose 30% damage because now he doesn't have that potion to throw, but because that potion that got thrown hit for 0, and he's a single target champion, he unfortunately does not do very well when missing, right? If he throws and, you know, the target misses. So there. Oh, he killed his 2. But now Volca's going to have to kill the rest. Broke here, do you mind holding things in place? But as we can see, he does just fine. His potions do seem to be doing AoE. Oh, that's right, because he had fire potions, and it did say that the fire can spread.
The secret greatness has a price.
So there, he's throwing fire, poison, then fire, fire, fire again, fire, wow, fire, poison, right? He is completely random. It is very, very difficult to try to predict this champion. So I do want to set people up with the expectation that against AoE of any kind, I don't think he's going to be consistent for you. And he does have those 2 giant weaknesses in there. But we're not here to highlight the weaknesses of a champion. We're here to highlight the advantages of a champion. So in the campaign, any of your levels where you're not being swarmed, or specifically any of the levels that you have a boss, where Nisalt is going to succeed at is with poison. Poison does max percent HP damage to the target. It's usually about 1%, and then it ticks up to 5 times, so 5 seconds of poison. And then in Nisalt's case, it can actually tick for 6 seconds. Poison is not specifically stackable, so typically you would only want 1 poison champion on your team. Most players in the game will argue that Cuke is the premier or the best poison champion in the game, and I would say he's probably the most constant poison champion in the game. However, when it comes to Nisalt, Nisalt is guaranteed the poison on those auto attacks if they're poison vials, so I guess that's like 50% of the time. But also, he can add 2 other dots to the mix, which I think gives him a huge advantage over Cuke. Again, in the campaign, any of the levels where we come across a boss does not like having a whole bunch of dots on him. So any of those levels, or any of the levels with a heavy armored, slow-moving enemy, is going to be Nisalt's jam. We can talk about synergies all day, like with defenders or certain champions like Mary, who not only slow the target, but debuff them as well, so they're taking additional magic damage, which makes Nisalt look 10 times better. I'm really excited that I did take him up to 6-star on this account. We are going to mess with him in Guild Boss and see if I can make him look stupendously amazing. With that being said, a lot of champions would benefit from Mary slowing them down, like slowing down enemies and debuffing them. So it is kind of a hard comparison that Nisalt literally needs that to shine, whereas a lot of other enemies, or a lot of other champions will shine, and then if they were to have Mary, they would shine like a beacon rather than just shine, if that makes sense. Where Nisalt is going to shine the most, though, is against your single target bosses in the Void Rift, your single target in the arena. There is a sustained DPS, and although he does perform well in there, there are too many enemies. So I don't think that that is the best place for him, unless your strategy is centered around the concept of, I want to kill one of these targets off very, very quickly. I do think Nisalt can, because he's all single target, can melt that one target very quickly with his ult, and then you would move on. In the AoE arena, I would absolutely not bring him. In the flying arena, again, I'd be very hard-pressed to encourage it. One last thing of note in the campaign that I didn't think to mention of is that if you are not a brand new player and you're trying to push content level 9, normal 9, a lot of the enemies in that have enormous HP pools. So, for that reason, Nisalt will be amazing in those levels. To just whittle down their health, and then the fact that he's doing dot damage means he's constantly doing damage to them, and then because his numbers are so high, he should chew through their defense quite easily as well. When it comes to raids, he's actually very good at the promotion raids for mages. He can often hold the split path by himself. However, you do need to give him that gear so that he does hit hard enough. He, I would also argue, have a backup just in case, but a backup that's not your Voltus. That's not your AoE mage champion if you're using Soleil or, in my case, Comet. Understand that he can hold that lane by himself. It'd be a good thing to have a safety net in case he doesn't one-shot things. He does, though, very respectable damage to even the most heavily armored enemies in the game. So, very, very useful. In Marksman, even though he can hit the flyers, again, a lot of the flying enemies are resistant to magic damage, so he's going to be doing less there. And then because of the nature of his kit, since the enemies are flying over everything anyways, I don't think that that's going to be the best place for him. Only bring him there if you want experience. In Endurance, everything is poisoned, even your enemies. So having extra dots could be useful. However, a lot of the things tend to be fast moving or like big heavy armor. And Nisalt, although you could argue, well, what if he one-shots the fast-moving dogs or the fast-moving spiders? Or, well, I want him to kill off the big, tanky mobs that do show up in it. By all means, you can use them. Just make sure that you have defenders at your crystals so that Nisalt has plenty of time to craft and then kill them off. In Melee, we've talked about certain strategies where you can have your mage up on the perch until you lose that platform. I don't think that this would be the place for Nisalt at all. A lot of the enemies come in waves of like 4, and Nisalt only having 3 attacks. Yes, he has his ultimate, but do you want to have to waste his ultimate every time just in case? And the answer does not feel good. I definitely think you'd be better off just bringing another melee champion. Even an ungeared one can help slow things down or help change the way that the wave is coming towards you. Things like Clan Boss and Artifact Material Raid, these are two of the places I love for Nisalt. Nisalt literally does feel like he was created for Clan Boss, or Guild Boss, and most specifically, not only is he like just all single target, but all of his effects are just, damage over time and melting, and they scale with the HP of the boss. So this is why I was saying that if you get to Nightmare 2, that might be a good time for you to build Nisalt. However, I do think that Nisalt feels a little bit more gear dependent than many other champions in the game. Yes, you could argue, well, of course, if you put any champion in max attack, max crit rate, max crit damage, of course they're going to perform well. I just think that Nisalt, his crits will crit for higher, his damage over time effects will last, will hit tick for a higher damage. I will say, though, that Nisalt is going to be one of those champions that you will benefit much more from, attack percentage with an attack substat compared to a lot of other champions. So just like Osiren, how we have those damage over time effects going on in Osiren's kit, Nisalt's going to be in that same boat. Artifact Material Raid, we're fighting one boss and his HP keeps growing the further in we get. If you could eventually get to a tank that can self-sustain or has a means of being sustained by another party member that is not on your platform, you could argue to bring Nisalt here. I don't think that this is the best of places for him. I think in the Artifact Material Raid, when you have 2 platforms, yes, by all means, you could bring him here for that single target, poison down the boss for sure. In Tide, Tide has a weird relationship for Nisalt. He's surprisingly good in Tide, which doesn't make a lot of sense. And the reason is that when he throws out a potion, that burning potion that can spread up to multiple enemies, because you often get that burning potion, it does tend to spread. And then when you're fighting the big bosses on any of the levels, you often can kill the boss reliably fast. It's so weird that it works well in that content, and I'm still shocked about it. But I've tried it a few times, and it's been surprisingly good. Resource raids. So in the XP raid, as we showed, he's not necessarily great here. However, the EXP raid, a lot of these enemies have very low HP, so it does not matter. In the gold raids, however, the enemies tend to have a lot of HP. They're big health sponges. So I would say that there's an argument to bring him for the gold raid if you needed a single target damage dealer to help with like I guess the little ones I call goblins, the mid tier I call hobgoblins, and then you have your king goblin. For the king or the hobgoblins, they have very extensive HP pools. So him being able to melt those ones away specifically would feel good. However, after he throws his 3 potions, then he has to craft some. So at that point, you might want a different, more sustained DPS, but that's up to you. Gear raids. In the gear raids, he has a very, very weird relationship in all of these. In all of these, you have a boss that will eventually come down for you to kill at some point in the raid. In Gear Raid 1, we're constantly dealing with swarms of enemies, and I don't think that this would be necessarily the best place for him. We are going to do some trial runs in the upcoming days here, because I am trying to push my Gear Raid 1 further. With that being said, when the boss comes down, I would argue that his damage could be very, very valuable for killing or eliminating the boss. However, the bosses in Gear Raid 1 are magic resistant, which means Nisalt is working at a disadvantage. You'd be more heavily relying on your poisons or your raw damage on the champion to outpush that magic resistance stat that they have. In Gear Raid 2, I think this would be the best place for him to shine. However, the final boss does not have a lot of HP, which is weird, because the whole rest of the level is based upon your survival and living long, and then they kind of reward you with this like stupidly easy boss that, you know, just dies again near it's weird how fast the boss dies in Gear Raid 2 when you fight the boss. With that being said, a lot of the golems that come running down, Nisalt, after they, you know, run into something, they've reduced their own HP by like 60%. Nisalt's going to polish off a whole bunch of them. And even the enemies that are more magically resistant, they are slow moving, which gives Nisalt more time to craft his potions and then throw them at these slow moving pharaoh zombies with the giant swords. So Gear Raid 2, I think he arguably has a potentially good place. It's just a matter of making sure that he can consistently one-shot a lot of the enemies there, or weaken the enemies enough that your teammates kill them off in very quick order afterwards. Gear Raid 3, this is a place I don't think Nisalt would be great in at all. The boss starts spawning enemies, and then you would have also waves of flyers constantly spawning, and then you have to chew through them. I think that Nisalt would be great for killing the boss specifically if you can set up that very specific scenario. However, I think the detriment that Nisalt would come with by trying to put him up front to craft potions and then attack the boss, I don't foresee that ever really working out. So if somebody comes up with a very clever strategy, right, like maybe using Aracha with Nyx hanging below Nisalt so that those champions are eliminating the flies, it could work. You might be able to punch a hole that Nisalt could attack through and then just ult during those to really burn down the boss to try to burst it down. I would almost argue, though, why not just play with an extra piercer at that point? So use caution for Gear Raid 3 for sure. Faction trials. So in the basic trial, we do need a mage. Part of the basics is one of the requirements to 3-star a bunch of levels is deploying 3 mages. Nisalt does count as a mage, and everything in there is weak to poison damage. Or not poison. Well, yes, poison, I suppose. Is weak to magic damage. So for those reasons, he's absolutely amazing in the basic trials if you like Nisalt. I am not telling anybody if anybody else is like on the fence and they're like, I don't know if I want Nisalt. The answer is no. Don't build Nisalt then. Nisalt is definitely a character that you commit to try to make the best of for sure. But yes, Nisalt is valuable in in basic trial 1. In the trials for the esoterics, which is what Nisalt is part of, he has a very good place here as well. Again, you end up fighting a lot of those slow-moving golems that I was talking about from the Campaign 9. However, because of his ammo system, I would still argue definitely take him up to 5-star. If Nisalt is your cup of tea, take him up to 5-star fully promoted as quickly as possible so that you get the most effectiveness out of him. And even then, I do argue that it's once you take him to 6-star, getting those base stats up higher so that his dots are ticking for more is very valuable. There is a gimmick to the fight as well, and sometimes that gimmick and Nisalt's kit can clash, so be mindful of that. Nisalt is definitely a champion I think a lot of players are going to have to really evaluate when you lose a level. Why did I lose that level, right? Was it I expected Nisalt to one-shot and he didn't? Number 2, Nisalt didn't do nearly the damage I thought he was going to do. 3, enemies were too fast for Nisalt. Nisalt comes with a lot of weaknesses, and a great comparison I heard for this last night at work. I was listening to Ketchup and Mustard talking about fighters in other games, like in fighting games. But the comparison they made is certain champions in their games have to work 10 times harder to get off the same damage as a different champion that is just already like high stats anyways. And because of that, it makes that first champion mentioned look worse. Nisalt is unfortunately in that category where I feel like Nisalt to look like good, right? To look like a top tier character needs more setup than other champions get for free. What I mean by this, we're going to go do Guild Boss 3, Nightmare 3. And this will be that good comparison for you guys that champions like Wrath kind of just get all their stats up front, and Nisalt being all backloaded. I shouldn't say all backloaded because his initial flask throw will do enough damage to the boss as well.
Sacrifice for Nisalt's science.
An end to destruction.
So again, we're going to let this run for about a minute. And the reason I'm only using the 2 champions is because we only really care about these 2 champions doing their specific damage. I didn't pay attention to his vials at all. So here, the 2 of them are not breaking this barrier. And again, I want to stress, this is Nightmare 3. With that being said, I want to stress this again. This is Nightmare 3. Nisalt is not fully awakened. He is not fully skilled up. We're going to go look at this in a second. They did the 2 of them about half, a little over half, of this Dragon's Breath shield. So here we do have a bigger discrepancy in damage. I would argue that some of this is probably just because Nisalt's damage really comes from his dots. So not letting the battle play out longer, not giving Nisalt the more chances for poison. I would chalk this up to the inconsistency of Nisalt. That when I ulted with him, I did not pay attention to which potions he had out. And as I looked and saw the potions scattering around him, they were fire, which is not what we wanted from that ultimate. And that is also a 40% decrease in damage compared to if he had poison potions. This is what I really want to stress with him, is that as much as I think that Nisalt is this super amazing design, and I love the fact that he does have these big glaring weaknesses in his kit, makes me like, it's such good game design. Just 100% coming back up. Hi, baby. It is such good game design. Wrath, in that same context, I almost feel like is bad game design. I like the fact that he has to stay in combat to keep his HP up, but it's also weird to me that he can tank the dragon, does not need a healer, because he goes in and out of his ultimate so much, and he lifesteals so much from that ultimate that he doesn't need a healer. Like, he's a tank, a healer, and a high damaging DPS all in one. And again, I love the fact that Wrath is free, but it makes him a lot less interesting. It makes him just feel OP, right? Actually overpowered. Not the, oh, this champion's OP or this champion's broken. Wrath genuinely, I do think, is at the top of that chart.
Ready or not, this is war.
Oh, there he is.
A sacrifice.
So
for
in this
his own
example
science.
that we showed in the video today is that Nisalt is level 52. So he hasn't raised up to his full potential in stats. Because he hasn't raised up to his full potential in stats, this means that even the gear that I put on him isn't going to be as effective as it could be getting him up to fully 6-starred. Or level 60. When we talk about skills, I do have his basic attack is at max level. And the ultimate, I did have an extra 5 seconds of duration to it, so it's at 20 seconds. However, it can scale to 25. So him missing out on an extra 5 seconds of attacks, that's typically only about 2 attacks off of his base speed, but that is a big deal. And then his Toxic Fire, unfortunately, just got 1 second extra to the duration, not the extra damage. So we are missing 3 and 4 skills overall, and he's not awakened at all. So I do want to stress that those damage numbers that we're seeing, those big differences between him and Wrath, understand we're not comparing apples to apples here. We have definitely compared an apple to a Granny Smith apple. That they are both DPS champions, but unfortunately it's not necessarily the most fair playing ground. And Nisalt, I would still say, operated quite well. Just not broken in the examples. I'm hoping that as I level him up to 60, I get to prove to you guys how amazing he is. And maybe we'll do a series where it's just me putting Nisalt in a whole bunch of different scenarios to show where he is great at. Guys, thank you very much for watching this video on Nisalt. I hope that you enjoyed it. And for those of you who like Nisalt, I hope that you don't feel like I badmouthed him at all. I genuinely do love this champion. I think the design is absolutely great. I love that he's an alchemist with a sack full of bottles, with bottles on the outside, him holding a flask. I just think the overall concept and design is absolutely there. I will say, though, I think his alchemy is a little underwhelming. It's a great concept. I do wish it scaled with something. Rather than just the promotions, it would be really, really amazing if, as you gave him more attack speed, like for every 100 attack speed, if he got like 0.3 seconds off of his alchemy time or 0.5 seconds. Don't go overboard. Don't give him like an extra second off. That would be ridiculous. But give a reward for building him with attack speed. Or you know, if you give him like extra damage, let this 40% damage scale up with that extra damage. Something among those lines. I do think he's an absolutely amazing mage. I'm really excited that I have him to 6-star on this account. I am going to start pushing him into my dragon team over the next couple of days and seeing if I can get him to out-damage my Comet. And once he starts out-damaging Comet, I think I might remove Comet from my dragon team. And for the record, for those of you who don't know, Comet is perfectly fine for dragon. There's nothing wrong with that. I just want Nisalt on my dragon team. I just want to make him look good. Guys, thank you very much for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to hit the like button, or if you want to, subscribe, and then you can watch all my other videos and all my other Evaluate the Epic videos, which are somewhere. If I remember, I'll put them in the description. I am terrible about remembering descriptions, though. If you want to interact with us, come over to twitch.tv/sprinklebeard. I am on vacation for the next week, so when this video goes up later today, I potentially am going to be streaming later tonight, and it's Sunday, which means that there's no competition, which means I'll probably be streaming a whole lot today. Thank you very much for watching, but of course, until that next time, ta-ta.